Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into one of the most frustrating, totally universal quirks of human behavior. Have you ever wondered why your future self can feel so incredibly distant from you right now? And more importantly, could that psychological distance actually explain why now almost always beats later when we make decisions? We're going to bridge the gap between behavioral economics and neuroscience to figure out why doing the right thing for tomorrow feels so hard today. To get started, picture this. It's Sunday night and you make a really solid, genuine plan. You tell yourself, tomorrow I'm going to start eating healthy. You fully believe it. That future diet sounds great. But then Monday night rolls around, you're exhausted from work, and boom, you're ordering a massive pizza. The diet is completely out the window. So what exactly happened there? Why do our preferences flip so easily just because the timing shifted? I mean, your values didn't actually change between Sunday and Monday. You didn't suddenly stop caring about your health. But the absolute second that choice became immediate, when later suddenly became right now, your entire plan reversed. To understand why, we have to look at how our brains calculate time. Part 1. The math of impatience. Let's break down the underlying equations our brains are using behind the scenes. It all starts with a concept called temporal discounting. Basically, this is our brain's tendency to value immediate rewards way more than future ones. Put simply, the further away a reward is, the less value our brain assigns to it in the present moment. This is actually a deeply ingrained evolutionary trait, but it doesn't always work in a logical way. Let's look at a classic dilemma. Imagine I offer you a choice right now. I can hand you $50 today, or I can give you $100 in exactly 1 year. If you're like most people, waiting a whole year feels like an eternity. The immediate draw of that $50 today almost always wins, even though, logically speaking, doubling your money in a single year is an unbelievable return. But watch how weird our brains are when we shift the timeline. We just talked about scenario A. But what if I offer you scenario B? I'll give you $50 in 5 years, or $100 in 6 years. When researchers ask people this, almost everyone suddenly chooses the $100. Our preference completely, bizarrely reverses to the larger amount. Think about what just happened. In both of those scenarios, the wait between the smaller reward and the larger reward is exactly the same. It's just 1 year. Economists call this hyperbolic discounting. It proves that we don't discount time evenly. Instead, our brains apply this massive, almost irresistible bonus to anything we can get right now. When you push both options into the distant future, that now bonus vanishes, and suddenly we become perfectly rational, patient people. Which brings us to part 2, the stranger in your brain. Let's look at the neuroscience to see what's actually happening in our heads. Neuroscientist Hal Hershfield did some really fascinating fMRI research on this. He put people in brain scanners and asked them to think about themselves in the present moment. And as expected, a brain region called the medial prefrontal cortex, which handles how we process things about ourselves, lit right up. But then he asked them to think about themselves 10 years in the future. Surprisingly, that activation significantly dropped. And it didn't just drop. The pattern actually changed. It looked remarkably similar to the brain activity produced when people think about a complete stranger. When you try to imagine yourself a decade from now, your brain genuinely struggles to recognize that person as you. Now, I want to put some guardrails on this science. This is a reduction in psychological connection, okay? It is not a literal case of mistaken identity. Your brain knows perfectly well that the future you is still you intellectually speaking. But emotionally, the distance makes it incredibly difficult to empathize with that future version of yourself. You struggle to sacrifice for your future self for the exact same reason you'd hesitate to give up your pizza to a random stranger on the street. I also want to clear up a major myth here. You'll sometimes hear people claim that your rational brain just shuts off when you're faced with temptation, or that your emotional limbic system goes to war and defeats your logic. That's not accurate at all. A region called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is basically just integrating inputs and weighing the competing signals. It never shuts off. It just reports which signal is stronger. And because of that built-in bonus for the present moment, the now signal is simply a whole lot louder. Moving to part 3, face-to-face with tomorrow. If our brains treat our future selves like strangers, what happens if we force an introduction? To test this, researchers ran an experiment where people were asked to make hypothetical financial choices about how much money they put into a retirement account. But there was a really clever twist. Group 1 viewed standard, current photos of themselves while making the choice. Group 2, however, viewed digitally age-progressed photos. They were essentially staring at an older, aged version of their own face. The results were wild. The group looking at the standard photo allocated a normal baseline amount. But the group staring at their digitally aged photo allocated significantly more money to their hypothetical retirement savings. By making the future self visually concrete, giving that stranger a real face, it actually reduced their present bias and made them way more willing to save. Now, we've got to apply some scientific humility here. Yes, visualizing the future altered their choices, but the big caveat is that these were purely hypothetical choices in a lab. Nobody was actually depositing money into a bank. So this shows a really cool correlation, not strict causation. Simply looking at an old picture of yourself on an app isn't going to permanently fix your real-world financial behavior overnight. Finally, part 4, bridging the empathy gap. Let's pull all this together and see what it means for us. Everything we've covered today gives us a really powerful new way to look at ourselves. If you struggle with procrastination or chasing short-term pleasure, it's not some huge moral failing or lack of discipline. Often, it's just a structural quirk in how our brains are wired. Intellectually, you obviously know future you is you, but that psychological distance makes sacrificing for them feel really unnatural. Recognizing this empathy gap is the absolute first step to actually outsmarting it. So I'm going to leave you with this one provocative thought. Understanding the math of impatience and the neuroscience of how you view your future self kind of changes the stakes of your daily habits, doesn't it? The very next time you're stuck between a fun reward today and a much better benefit tomorrow, ask yourself, how will you treat the stranger you become tomorrow?